Welcome to another episode of the Africa podcast. My name is Mikey Mhenna. Today on this series, I'm really excited that we have Rula Alami, who is an art consultant, assistant curator, and art dealer based in Lebanon. She's the vice president of INAASH Association and has been engaged in the Middle East art market for over 15 years all over the region. Today, we're going to be talking a lot about Palestinian embroidery and modern contemporary art from the Arab world. Rula, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.
So for a little bit of context for our listeners, I had the pleasure of moderating a panel about textiles and embroidery, and you were on that panel, and I was simply amazed by the wealth of information that you have about Palestinian embroidery and your experience. And so I said to myself, I have to convince you to join us on the podcast. And so I'm really, really excited to have you here.
Thanks.
So I want to start out by asking the sort of the first question, the most simple question is, when did you first become interested in embroidery from Palestine in a way that wasn't just focused on how pretty it looked or how nice it looks visually?
It actually started from childhood because we all grew up with INAASH and otherwise cushions mostly in our homes. So it's something that grew up with me. And when I came back after 16 years living in the US and the UK, I was kind of nostalgic and I contacted INAASH and joined the board. And this is how the journey started. So it's something that grew up with me.
So tell people who don't know what INAASH is, what is this organization? What does it stand for and what does it do?
It's INAASH is an NGO, a Lebanese NGO actually, that was founded by Huguette Bouri Galon, the famous artist. It was founded in 1969 to employ women refugees and to create employment, but also to pursue and encourage and train these women refugees the craft and the heritage of Palestinian embroidery. And INAASH, evolved over the years. It started like more traditional cushions, and with time it became a serious artistic NGO, and we're now working to become a social enterprise. And it's much more contemporary. We have the traditional and we have the contemporary part.
So when we talk about embroidery, right, like if somebody's listening to this and they hear Palestinian embroidery, why is this can you help explain why this isn't just about the textiles and about the garments and the sort of the items, and why this is actually like a much bigger
it is
social cause?
I can give a little historical overview that pre-1948, embroidery was like a village tradition whereby women in the afternoon, after their village work in the land, used to gather and embroider together. And they all used to use motifs that were inspired by their flora, fauna, even by their food. And so it was like a social traditional gathering. Each village, each area had its own motives. After the Nakba, all these women had to be in camps and they had to mix together. And so they started embroidering together. And it became like a cultural patrimony, and it became part of resistance also to preserve that heritage and to assert, the nation of Palestine. So it has a very, let's say, political meaning.
Yeah. Can you give me okay, so I have, despite the best efforts of my grandmother and my aunts and mom and many people in my family, I don't really know much about textiles and about embroidery. If you can, for a dummy or an ignorant person like me, can you walk me through kind of the entire sort of supply chain? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but on this image we have here, we have this image of these these people in the fields, right? And then next to that, we have images of women sort of hunched over with needle and thread, I think.
Historically, it goes back worldwide. It really goes back to China, it seems, when I read about it, and to the Silk Road. Now, the particular case about Palestine is that it was a crossword location for, religions, for many religions, and for the Ottomans. We had a lot of missionaries coming, the Franciscan coming from the Balkans. So you have a merger of cultures that came into Palestine and brought the culture of mostly textiles. There were a lot of weaving centers of textiles in Palestine. And the embroidery was mixed. I mean, if you see some of the Palestinian and you go to East Europe, you can find similar designs. But how it developed in Palestine, it was from this mix of cultures, and but it developed in villages. It became something very particular to the actual land of Palestine. And this is, a long journey, but it's also an amalgam of cultures on one land.
Yeah, super interesting. Okay, so let's kind of jump into the sort of the history of the textiles. Just basic questions. What textiles are actually used? I mean, what can you find when you talk about?
There is a variety of textiles. It depends on the towns. So you had like gauze, I think, and cotton were weaved in Palestine. The saya, some of the saya was imported from Syria. The velour, I think, came from Turkey, from the Ottomans. So each area had mostly its own kind of textile. Like, for example, the urban areas had more, expensive textiles that they used for embroidery. So it really also depends on contacts with the outside world.
I was told this story that, like, the different motifs across Palestine mean different things, right? And different colors can mean different things, and different patterns can mean different things. Can you give us a couple examples of what this means? I know right now you're sitting in INAASH, right? And so you have all these options. So yeah, take us on a little bit of a little tour. Or
what I found the most interesting is the color red, because usually it was red on black. But I was reading that even the kind of red is different. Like Gaza has the fuchsia red, Al-Khalil have a darker red. I mean, the red varies. The symbols are mostly based on the local village. Like here, actually, we have a tobe. The white one is from Ramallah. And the next one, I think, is from Beit Dajan. And you can see it's more elaborate. There is more than embroidery, there is a total different approach to embroidery for the chest. I can show you here.
Yeah, please.
These are samples from INAASH, but I can show you this symbol, اللي هو شجرة السرو. This symbol is almost, which is our emblem actually of INAASH, because it's almost in every single village, but they have it in different size or upside down, but it's always there. Some of the symbols are related to flowers. Some of the symbols, even the names, like خبز الطحان, and حبة الرمان. Even the names are a bit not funny, but interesting. We have a lot of also geometric designs like these. Some are inspired by in Bethlehem by the cross, the short cross. It's so varied. But what happened is, with the Nakba, and when they started to embroider together, I would imagine a piece of this would have many symbols together. It's not one area. So this is a modern Palestine. It's post-Nakba. It's not one area in Palestine. So there was a merger. It was not anymore the traditional thobe embroidered by the little ladies who used to, gather things for the trousseau when they married. It became something more merged and more unique.
Do you have a sense of, right now you have this wealth of information. if we had been speaking, 30 years ago, how much of this stuff did you actually know? How much of this knowledge is passed from generation to generation and is very widely spread? Like right now, I've flashed this photo on the screen, and immediately, without missing a beat, you said this is from Ramallah.
Yeah, actually, it took time. And in the last few years, I became much more interested. And a big eye-opener was the exhibitions that were held here at Dar al-Nimr and in Palestine with the Palestine Museum. The first one was at the Themes, curated by Rachel Dedman, and then Labor of Love in Palestine and the museum, and recently in Qatar. So all of these researches and archives that were used from INAASH or other institutions throughout Palestine really were eye-opener. And brought the whole subject into a more academic sphere where you can read, you can find out much more clearly.
Yeah,
this is a very interesting exercise that we did at INAASH. It's like small canvases, the size almost of a paper, and each one of these is embroidered. It's an area in Palestine, each one of these.
Okay, so what I want to do is, if you'll allow me, let's just stick on Ramallah for a second, all right? What aspects of this thobe are immediately obvious to you that this is from Ramallah?
It's the red color on white. Ramallah is known for red color on white and a lot of florals, mostly, I think.
So these images, like on the sleeve, for example, that gives it away. The chest pattern, obviously the color that you're talking about.
Always, the chest is very important. Actually, this chest of this thobe is one of my thobes because I have a little collection. It's a Bethlehem thobe. Maybe there are other pictures with you. It's the star. It's the luxury of Palestinian thobes because it's made with saya. Actually, here, yes, this is a bed dajan thobe, the one you just showed, but the Malak thobe is a thobe that is for the bride, but the bride of the urban, because it's an expensive one. It's very expensive to make. It has a process here to embroider. It's very heavy embroidery, and it's usually part of the trousseau of higher end families. Also, the Beit Dajan thobe, it's the Yafa area. It's also elaborate and very, very beautiful thobe. So each one has a story and actually has also a kind of traditional social class related to it. Like the Bedouins thobe are also elaborate but more simple, and the material is more simple. And the colors of the Bedouin thobe are more striking. But the interesting thing is the Bedouin thobe, if a woman loses her husband, then she embroiders her thobe in blue. And then with time, if she wants to remarry or, get over this, she will start embroider half blue and half red. So it's a telling, it's a narrative of a tradition. Yeah, here you can see the blue and red somewhere here. On the bottom, we have north of Palestine, where they used a lot of patchwork. So yeah, this is a variety. We have Gaza in the middle, the ones with fuchsia, the Jerusalem one, which has stripes, yellow and black stripes, and the Bedouin ones.
Yeah, I always found it funny, the blue, because it's like as if the thobe is like a dating profile,
Indeed, yeah, it's a sign, it's a language, it's a storytelling, it's a narrative of the woman. Yes, indeed.
It says their location, and it sends their, like, whether they're single or available or divorced or looking.
Really, it's a storytelling of a people and of a land, and that's the importance of Palestinian embroidery.
Yeah, I want to talk about the cost for a second. Both time and resources. So something like this, I mean, how long does something like this take to make in 2023?
Okay, the one we're looking at is an old thobe. It's very difficult to find and it's very expensive. The ones that are made at INAASH or other NGOs, something like this would I mean, working daily a few hours, and here they work under darkness and under duress and very difficult circumstances. It would take like 6 months to do something with full embroidery.
Wow.
And it depends also on the material. If it's easier, if it's on cotton, it's more difficult. If it's on silk, more difficult if it's on white material. So it really depends on the material. But and the way it's made, which I didn't know, is like a piece of this. They put the canvas on it and they embroider, and then they take out the threads of canvas one by one, which is a lot of work. So it's not only embroidering, it's also pulling the canvas out.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the response? I mean, like you were talking about INAASH is trying to become more of a social enterprise. What do you mean by that exactly?
It means focusing on women empowerment and on the wage part of embroidery, increasing their wage, improving their lives, and recycling all the profits into that enterprise. It's not a profit making, obviously. It was never that, but also, social enterprise in the sense of empowering those women and creating an economic good livelihood or semi-good livelihood for their families.
Do you feel like the amount of interest in Palestinian embroidery has gone up over the last few decades?
Very, very much. For its beauty, for its meaning, and for its modernism also, because even we have the young people interested because the embroiderers make more simple, more modern, less embroidery T-shirts. So it's became more accessible cost-wise and design-wise.
Yeah. I find it to be fascinating. A few years ago, more than a few years ago, like maybe 10, 15, almost 20 years ago at this point, in the States, you would start seeing big brands start to take these types of ideas and incorporate it, like at Urban Outfitters and places like that.
Yeah.
And sort of strip the social and political meaning and cultural meaning and just be left with the visual images.
This trend, in fashion, the ethnic trend, it's not only Palestinian, but there are a lot of collaborations between famous designers and different areas of the world, South America, China. And now with Palestinian embroidery, it was hijacked by Israelis, basically, because they used it on their airlines, and they used it as their own. Or sometimes they say it indigenous, as if somebody or those people were, don't exist anymore. So yes, it's not mentioned, but at the same time, having it, with modern fashion and collaborations with the Western designers is important, whether it's mentioned or not. This is a Ramallah flower again.
So. You've said this a couple of times. You've talked about this idea of sort of modernism. When you see an image like this, can you, or could somebody place it in a place and time? I mean, these types of motifs, not necessarily, right?
This could be East European also. I mean, it can remind you of the Balkan embroidery. But somebody, more expert maybe would say, yeah, this is a Ramallah on a Ramallah thobe, because it's mostly the colors, red and white again.
Yeah. I mean, it's the reason why I ask about it is because sometimes, I feel like especially given the history of Palestine in the 20th century, there's like pre-Nakba and post-Nakba, right? But obviously this art form was evolving and continues to evolve. So I wonder if it's like you look at this and you're like, yeah, this wasn't fashionable pre-1920, or this wasn't fashionable before the 1890s. I mean, do we have some research on this?
Pre-48, it was more, like I said, by village, by urban area, and they developed each one their own, set of symbols and motifs. And then when they started embroidering together and embroidery really became commodified, even, the villagers who used to embroider couldn't afford anymore what they embroidered. They barely can have a cheap thobe, and it was commodified and it was commercialized, and it became, more the middle class people and the diaspora who you started to wear these. During that time, as I told you, the motifs were mixed together. And also the design evolved. Like when we were much smaller, it was mostly cushions and runners. And with time, it became more modern, contemporary cushions. It became clothing, like this jacket I'm wearing, scarves, like this one. So it became much more, and it's still going in that direction, and collaborating with designers and simplifying some of the embroideries to make it more affordable. So it's never ending, really. But you have, the soul of Palestine is always there. You could feel it.
Are there similar things happening? I mean, obviously, INAASH isn't the only organization, but what are some of the other organizations that people should check out if they're curious?
Oh, there is a lot. There is a lot of private initiatives, like designers in Jordan, Palestine, and there are lots of institutions. I don't know. I don't remember the name. Like لجنة المرأة. يعني في كتير. There is a lot in Amman and Kuwait. So it's not only INAASH, of course not.
Yeah. Do you have
We're very famous for the quality of embroidery. Really, when you take a piece and take both sides, it's so perfect because they're very well trained embroiderers, and we're hoping to do the same with their generations to come, because you have a new generation that doesn't necessarily have the patience to hand embroider. And so we're trying. That's why social enterprise is important, because you want to empower them and encourage them to take it as a way, as a source of income as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and given the economic crisis in Lebanon as well, the number of people who can afford this
very important, exactly,
is hugely diminished. If I were to ask you, what are the biggest threats to the sort of survival of Palestinian embroidery as an art form and as a social resistance right now? What do you think are some of the biggest threats? I
just told you, is the continuity, is having new generations continue to embroider, because it should remain hand embroidery. It could be machine embroidery, but then it loses the charm and the meaning of it. So having new generations learn how to embroider is the biggest challenge, really.
Yeah.
That's important.
Interesting. Okay, I want to ask you about art, because as our listeners probably notice in your biography, that's a huge part of what you do and what you think about.
Yes. Yeah.
And what's interesting is that so much of contemporary art coming from Palestine features embroidery. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, embroidery really, it became a symbol of resistance, especially of the strengths of women and resistance, and that gained even more importance during the Intifada. The Intifada folk that had new symbols, always the Palestinian flag. So it became more important with time. And you see in most modern, especially modern Palestinian artists like Sulaiman Mansour, Nabil Anani, always there is either a chest of a thobe or a woman wearing thobe or a design of embroidery. So it be like on this, exactly like this one here by two different artists, as an integral part of Palestinian resistance shown in posters or in art. And then art developed, in our case, we had the chance and the luck of collaborating with Mona Hatoum. INAASH ladies created 12 panels representing 12 areas of Palestine, and they were called 12 Windows on Palestine. And she created this amazing installation. It was exhibited at Centre Pompidou, Museum of Houston, Tate Modern. And at this installation, she had like barbed wire between them, and it showed like the difficulty of passing from one area to the other. This is my understanding. So it really evolved, and we have currently a collaboration with the artist Samia Halabi. She created a panel, a very contemporary panel, limited edition. So this is how it became, integrated into Palestinian art.
So here's another random question. Do you ever sort of get sick of beating the drum and getting people to like care about this? Because I feel like it's one of those things that almost shouldn't need somebody to promote. It's it's so clearly valuable and so clearly important, and so clearly linked to.
It's as I said, it's a cultural patrimony. It's a kind of nation building outside after losing the land in Palestine. It's part of the nation building of Palestine. And it's beautiful. I mean, aesthetically beautiful. And there is a trend now in contemporary art. There is a huge trend for textiles. I mean, all over the world, artists who use textiles are in high demand, and embroidery even more. So this came, along in parallel with the ethnic part or the INAASH part. So no, we're riding the wave. Thank God.
Yeah. How many women are folks are involved?
The beneficiaries are about 500 women at least.
Whoa.
Yeah, 500. Some work more than others because they have more skills, and it depends on the work. But we're hoping now to activate sales using many methods. We're hoping for new funds because we lost a lot of our funds in the Lebanese crisis. So yeah, I mean, the more the merrier because they really need the work here in the camps in Lebanon. Yeah, this picture is like you have the traditional abaya on the left, and you have the scarf, which is more contemporary, and the jacket more contemporary, and down it was also, contemporary designs.
For these programs, where are the women based? I mean, for people who are unfamiliar with Lebanon, and
they're mostly in South Lebanon. We have some here in Beirut, but they're mostly in Tyre and Saida.
How old are these women? How did they grow up with this type of music?
I mean, from 70 down to 20s. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, and the older, the more skilled, and a lot of them are, focusing on teaching the younger ones.
Yeah.
We were supposed to have a school. We got funding for a school, embroidery school and design school, but everything was halted after the crisis here.
Yeah. I mean, in a pre-Sykes-Picot world, was Palestine known specifically for embroidery? I mean, like before these borders were known, right? And, at some point in the 1800s, when this was all sort of under the Ottoman Empire, and this is Greater Syria, are these towns? Sorry?
Yeah, it was because this. All the history that's documented, it was in the 19th century. So yes, it was, but it was more localized in villages and all over, not only Palestine, I think Lebanon, but the Palestinian embroidery, I think because of the history of the land and the Ottoman Empire, and as I said, the missionary got more mingled with other cultures. And so, yeah, it's an old tradition. It was there, of course, before Sykes-Picot, the disaster.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something I always remember, because for me growing up, every time I saw a very intricate embroidery, I assumed, oh, this is Palestinian embroidery. But then I thought to myself, where before these lines were really drawn in the sand, are there, embroidery traditions from like Nabatiya and from Sur and Saida as well?
I know Lebanon was very famous for silk.
Yeah.
Silk weaving. So it was mostly weaving centers throughout the Middle East. Syria, Halab, of course, it was weaving. I think embroidery were more localized.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot for some of these things. I want you to kind of give us a tour. So starting a little bit, each one of these panels, you sort of alluded to it beforehand, but if you can sort of do one panel at a time.
Starting from the left, it's
starting from this one,
the gray one, yes. The next one is the famous Tob al-Malak from Bethlehem.
Here?
The stripes and black. And then you go up, this is the Jerusalem Pope, because it's made from cyan material. The Bedouin, the one you see, the big one, the very large one, from Bir Saba, and the ones down also, this one is, the one is like Gaza. This one you have the blue on it is also, I think, tribal Bedouin South.
So these two people are single.
Yes, single and single.
Single and ready to mingle, these two. Okay.
Yeah, and then you have this one, I think it's from Gaza, I may be wrong. The ones done were from North Palestine, Akka area and Al Khalil, Hebron. And the last two are, I think, also South Palestine, Gaza. Maybe I'm biased because I'm from Gaza. I don't know. But these cover, they're 12 and they cover 12 areas of Palestine.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you were saying you're biased. Do you have a specific favorite that without fail?
I like the Beit Dajan area. I like the Yafa area a lot because it's marvelous. I mean, I like them all. I have a weakness to all of them, to the story of each one. But aesthetically, I love the Beit Dajan, the Yafa area ones.
And locally, how much embroidery is still being made in Palestine now?
I think in Gaza and the West Bank, they're still making a lot. And Dakhel, I really don't know. I doubt it. But there's still being made in Palestine and the camps to sell also as you know, a source of income.
Has there ever been an attempt to have sort of certified Palestinian embroidery? Do you know what I mean by that? Like, you know, like if like Cyprus, no, like Cyprus, for example, Cyprus very famously tried to essentially say halloumi can only be from Cyprus. They made this whole court case. They tried to copyright, and if you were going to eat halloumi, it had to be like certified from Cyprus. Just say like champagne from.
I think for Palestine, you don't need to copyright it. It's there with a big statement to say we are here. It's a nation that is will never be erased. It doesn't.
I wonder though if I kind of think it might be interesting to have it be like the certified thing. And no, these are Palestinian motifs made by Palestinians.
What's happening is working on archiving. You know, the Palestinian Museum worked with us on documenting all our samples. We have, you know, hundreds of samples. Documenting these and describing them and saying the history is a kind of taking possession of this heritage. For example, the Mona Hatoum project is a patented project for her. I think the best way to do it is through archiving, is through having, you know, well-documented archives of Palestinian embroidery. Yes.
Okay, so let's say there's somebody listening to this podcast and they're based in Barcelona, or they're based in Berlin or Boston or Beirut, whatever, and they want to start to learn how to do Palestinian embroidery. And where's the best place to start?
There is a new NGO, I think, but I forgot the name again, in Jordan. They send kits by area. You choose the area you want, and they send the whole kit where you can start to learn embroidery. I wish I got it with me. I have one of them. And I think it's a very, very intelligent idea to introduce it to the whole world. Yes.
What are there specific books that you would recommend?
There is a book, the best, in my opinion, is called Threads of Identity, and it's by Wadat Kawar. And Wadat Kawar is very important in preserving the authenticity of this heritage. She's a big collector. She has the biggest collection of Palestinian thobes pre-Nakba, and everything is very well documented. And she created this book called Threads of Identity. And for the history, the academic part, this is the book related to the exhibition called Labor of Love that I told you about. Also, it has a lot of academic aspects of Palestinian embroidery and its history. So yes, there are some books about it. For sure.
Yeah, and if anyone's in Amman, you can go to the Wadat Kawar.
Definitely, that's not to be missed. It's called Tiraz. They always change the thobes, and it's beautiful to visit in Amman.
Yeah. Labor of Love, can that be found online? Can people order it?
I think you can find it online. I think so, actually. I'm not sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Labor of Love.
Okay.
They called the exhibition Labor of Love specifically because the transformation after the Nakba was from women embroidering for themselves, for their daughters, for their trousseau, into a commercial, into a commodity where they had to do it to make a living. And so this is why it's called Labor of Love, this exhibition.
Yeah. Super, super cool. Going back to the art stuff, if you were to recommend some, you had already mentioned a few, but if you were to recommend some more contemporary artists or younger up-and-coming artists who you think incorporate Palestinian embroidery into their art, do you have any suggestions of people worth checking out?
I'm very bad with names, but a lot of artists do that collage with Palestinian embroidery. I have a friend artist, Amer Shumali, who created a wonderful, very touching project. And actually, he donated one of those works to INAASH, and we auctioned it at Bonhams. He did something called Broken Weddings, and he did panels of dresses made from the threads, the bobbin from the threads. And it's online. It's called Broken Weddings by Amer Shumali. And these were weddings, broken weddings, because it's the weddings that did not happen because of the Nakba. And he created huge panels, and each one was an area and the Nakba area. It was a huge success. So he didn't use embroidery, but he used the thobes and the idea of a thobe of a bridal thobes. Other artists, I don't have anything on my mind, but the young artists, even the young artists, when they want to draw a woman or paint a woman, they sometimes use, these are more modernist. This is Abdurrahman al-Muzayyan, a modernist. But this is a classic. It's in every house, even the poster. About the new artists, I'm not sure. I don't have specific names.
Even like Samia Halabi, she sort of her treatment of she sort of like disaggregates the idea of what this looks like, of what embroidery can look like.
I think you have the picture of Samia Halabi. She didn't take a thobe or anything. She just created a huge panel of squares. She went into her kind of abstraction because she's mostly an abstract artist.
Yeah.
And she came to INAASH, she chose it color by color, square by square, and they're all equal size squares with, it's a huge, beautiful panel. So she modernized the Tatreez. She took it to an abstract level.
Yeah.
So many ways to express it.
Can you do us a favor? When you hear Tatreez, does that mean exclusively Palestinian embroidery in your mind?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yes, because I'm surrounded by Tatreez, but Tatreez is a skill. I would connect it to women, which is a bit biased, but when you say Tatreez, it's the hands of a woman doing it. Even though I know men who embroider, but Tatreez is kind of women and cultures, saying their story, telling their story and their culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to skip into the quick Q&A. If you have any other suggestions of places where people can learn about this stuff, and please tell me.
We have a website. INAASH.org.
Yeah.
Where there is a history of INAASH about us, and they can buy online.
Yeah.
So that's something new also. And
okay. Amazing. Let's do the quick Q&A, and then if any other questions come up, I will jump into them.
Okay.
So what are you reading or watching these days?
Okay, I'm reading a book called Prisoners of Geography by Tim Marshall. A very interesting book that relates history and events and wars in the world to the geography, to whether it's an island or a volcano area, and all of these geographical specificities of the areas. So it's a very interesting book.
Who would you love to shadow for a day, past or present?
I think Jalaluddin Rumi, because I love Sufism and I love to read about Sufism. It would be nice.
Yeah. But I didn't ask you, for the Tatreez, are there any sort of specific religious motifs that sort of change from area to area?
The Bethlehem area and the areas where, and some of, I think, Jerusalem, they have the cross that, came actually from the Byzantine cross, which is a short cross.
Yeah.
But there isn't something specifically religious. No, I don't think so. No.
And did the sort of motifs and themes change over the 20th century as well as the sort of the situation in Palestine got harder and harder? Like after 1967, did new motifs emerge?
What I think happened is more like, sorry to interrupt, it's more like a merger of motifs from different areas. Now maybe they took a flower, made it smaller or bigger, but all the motifs were previously before 48. And during the Intifada, they started to do a lot of the Palestinian flag and the pigeon, the peace pigeon. So the Intifada dress is a bit different.
Yeah.
But I don't think that new motifs were invented. It's just how they put them together.
Okay, cool. What do people most misunderstand about your work?
About INAASH?
Sure, yeah.
I don't think they misunderstand. I think everything is clear and everything is kind of emotional attachment to the culture and to the beauty. It's very see-through.
Do people, I mean, in general, there must be sort of misconceptions. I mean, you've traveled sort of all over the world and met tons of people for whom this work is new. Are there like questions that you get over and over and over and over again that you're like, why haven't people figured this out yet?
The most difficult is when they tell you this is Israeli, and it's really revolting because it's not. It's one of the other among so many things that were hijacked. I mean, the embroidery is like an ambassador to the Palestinian nation. And when somebody comes and tell you, no, it's not Palestinian, it's very revolting. It's really something.
Yeah. Is that happening more or less over the last 20 years, do you think?
I think it's happening more, but at the same time, there is more awareness of the truth.
Yeah.
Of all of this, yeah.
Yes. All right. Let's do the last one. Whose work do you admire or are inspired by?
Are you talking about artists?
Anyone.
As an art collector, I like so many artists. I love Samia Halabi's work. As Palestinian, I would say Samia Halabi, because she's, her abstract, even though her work is abstract, her work is very affected by the Palestinian cause and her attachment to her land, even though she moved to the States since 1954. And I love Sulaiman Mansour. I have a weakness for him because his work is amazing, but also because we lived with his posters in our homes of Jabal al-Mahamil. So these are, his work is part, like Tatreez actually, is part of our upbringing. So these are artists that I admire. There are lots of writers I admire and lots of other artists, but this came to my mind.
Interesting. So what is INAASH up to now? What's next for the next couple of months?
Well, we have new designers, so we're doing a lot more contemporary stuff that can be worn, without having to say this is ethnic Palestinian. This is modern contemporary clothing with a Palestinian touch. Actually, this picture, I should have mentioned Khalil Rabah. He's a great, great Palestinian artist who used embroidery many times. This is a map of, I think, the Levant, all in embroidery. And he did recently, last year, at the Biennale in Sharjah also, he hang panels that are embroidery. And so he uses embroidery as a statement of Palestinian nation.
Yeah. Are there specific are there famous like designers or artists aside from sort of the like embroidery artists, the same way that there would be in sort of in the fashion industry? I mean, is that even a thing that exists? Are there like extremely prolific embroiderers?
I mean, they're all invisible. I mean, if you're talking about embroidery, our embroiderers are masters, but they're all invisible in the camps. If you're talking about integrating embroidery in fashion design, yeah, there are a few fashion designers. One of them, I forgot his name, but he's in Rome. He integrates a lot of Palestinian embroidery in his clothes, in his designs. And there is another one in Jerusalem, I think, a lady. It has been adopted by designers that are more Palestinian than international. It would be nice to reach out to international designers to introduce embroidery.
Yeah.
We're trying to do that, yeah, to embroider for international designers. We've done it with local Lebanese designers.
How can we make these masters, as you describe them, less invisible, more visible?
This is part of social enterprise, is to tell the stories on our platforms. Like, say, a thought took up to a year, we have to tell their story, tell how many hours they spend, their conditions. I mean, they're in the camps and they're quite conservative. Even taking pictures of them is not that easy, or videos. But telling their stories on social media is very important. Very important.
Yeah.
مثل الجندي المجهول. So sometimes we say we at INAASH, but it's not really we, it's them. Really.
Yeah, I noticed you corrected yourself.
Yeah, because it's the truth. I mean, they are the heroes.
And what are the stakes? I mean, if INAASH is as successful as it can be, like the best case scenario, what happens to transform these women's lives, and what does it mean for the broader cause? Like, what are the stakes?
From their point of view, it will be a better living, maybe being able to educate their children. The conditions are really bad. For INAASH and for embroidery, it means reaching out worldwide and expanding, the cause of Palestine and the heritage, the patrimony of Palestine worldwide. To me, the more you expand, the better is as a statement. It's reasserting Palestinian people's national identity. So is this what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were talking about like machine embroidery. What does that actually even mean? Like, what does that even look like?
I'll give you an example. I once bought a boot in London that has Palestinian embroidery, very similar, I think, from Topshop, and it's doing on a shoe is very difficult to do with the hand. So it was machine embroidery, but it was Palestinian patterns, and I don't know how and why. But we may reach a point where to do mass production, not INAASH, but to do mass production. This is a big debate, actually, even in Palestine. And I once heard a discussion with Birzeit University scholars that should it go into a machine embroidery or not? What happens if, with time, there are no hand embroiderers and you want to expand and become more mass producers? Should it be accessible to the mass, or should it stay a luxury, unique, handmade product? And people don't agree on this. So that's why I mentioned hand versus machine embroidery. For INAASH, it's certainly hand embroidery.
Yeah.
But, to make, mass production of T-shirts and things like this, maybe one day there will be a lot of machines doing this. Hopefully in Palestine, not in Lebanon. Not in China,
Are there any like rituals or traditions that may surprise me when it comes to the creation of a specific piece? Like when a piece as complicated as this, for example, is created, are there like any rituals or traditions with?
I think in the villages, it was a ritual. It was a daily ritual. they used to sit and embroider together in the afternoon, gather in one house and embroider. This is what I read. And not only that, what I found very funny is when they used to come and a woman, a young girl wants to marry, the first thing they used was to ask about her embroidery skills. The mother of the groom used to, which I found very interesting. Why ask about her embroidery skills? So it was so much integrated into that ritual that we're talking about. I found this really interesting. Not her cooking, but her embroidery skill.
Is that also because it was a commercial thing, like we are going to be able to sell this, or it's just like, no, we just need this?
No, it was totally part of the skills of a woman in her village. It was not, maybe they used to sell some, but it was not a commercial initiative at all. No.
Yeah.
Only became so, I think, mostly after the Nakba, when it became like, the thobe became like a commodity to make money, to make up for the losses of the land.
You know, across the world, there's this movement against fast fashion and a movement toward sustainable and ethical garments. How does that sort of intersect with the work that you do at INAASH?
Well, I can tell you, we're trying to source ethical material. This is what I heard from our designer. And what we do is to reuse pieces. I mean, we try, like, say we get this Najaf thobe, we try to use it all, like we do a abaya, and then what is left is done in a scarf, what is left, small pieces into something else. If this is what you mean, we try not to lose anything. And even in Palestine, one of the thobes I showed you was patchwork, was also the leftover material. They used to make them into beautiful thobes. So, and the material, I think we're trying to source ethical material. This is what you mean.
Yeah.
So every piece is precious. Even if a cushion is spoiled, we don't throw it. We take pieces, we make it like a panel, or put it in a small bag. It's so precious that we don't want to lose any bit of embroidery.
Yeah. Can we talk about weddings and like big occasions? Are there specific in each, I mean, like if we take a look at this panel here, are there specific garments that are clearly for weddings and specific motifs and specific patterns that you're like, oh, this is a Ramallah piece, but it's a Ramallah wedding piece?
I don't know much about wedding pieces in the past. Now, when I look at weddings now, they're mostly white thobes and embroidered mostly with red. I know that a lot of those thobes were part of the trousseau of the lady. She had to move and have a box, a trousseau, because she wouldn't own money, because they didn't have maybe enough money. So she would have few coins, maybe gold if she's wealthy, and other metals, but the thobes were her wealth. She would move with her thobes. Now, what they wore at weddings, I think, normal thobes, but I think now they're all white. And it's very important, the headdress, which I don't know much about, but the headdress had a lot of meanings, and the coins coming down from the headdress also had a significance of social status. So this is what I know about weddings.
So cool. Okay, I think I'm ready to wrap up. I want to just review some of these places that people can find information. So if somebody is looking for you, they can actually find you on Instagram at KIYANART.
KIANART is just my page, my very personal page of the exhibitions. KIANART.com is my private collection of Middle Eastern art, because I started collecting. And when I came back actually from the US and the UK, I was very nostalgic. So I went into INAASH. At the same time, I went into regional art, and it was much cheaper then. And so both were based on a nostalgia to the Middle East. So KIANART is my collection, my activities, my curations over the years.
And if anyone's looking for INAASH, it's easy to find online.
INAASH,
INAASH.
it's www.inaash.org. and INAASH Association on Instagram. Yeah.
Amazing. Rula, thanks so much for answering all my questions about this topic.
Yeah, sorry about missing information, but there is so much to know, and it's so exciting. Every day I have to read a little bit about it. I just finished a book by Layla Khaldi about INAASH embroidery, traditional embroidery, and its history. Yeah.
Okay, amazing.
Thank you.
Rula, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mickey. Thank you.